Hey everyone, just wanted to record a video going over some of the newer concepts this week, namely, as you can see, remix and remediation. As you can see as well down the bottom of the screen, there are captions to this video. They may not be perfect, but they are there. We will be also just showing you this week the materials that I'll be referencing at the end of the video, but I wanted to make a quick talk just so you could sort of hear me tell you what these things mean. To start, I do want to just show you what we're doing today. We're doing a brief review of the tenets of multimodality, the things we talked about in class last week if you missed it. We'll also be talking briefly about remix and remediation today. Those words will probably look familiar to you, remix more so than remediation. I will bring up a brief caveat with the word remediation later on, though, so just keep that in mind. As sort of a review of last week, we talked about modes and mediums in class last week. The modes, if you recall, are what I refer to as the ways that we communicate with each other. So those are through visual, linguistic, gestural, oral, and spatial means of communication. Visual, relying on sight, linguistic, on text and language, gestural, relying on the movement of the hands and the body, oral, relying on hearing, and spatial, relying on the physical arrangement of space, or of text on a page. As you can see, mediums, or media, then, are the tools we use to communicate in certain modes. So if I'm trying to communicate with you visually, I might rely on something like a painting, or a drawing, or a poster. If I'm trying to get you to engage with your hearing, I might rely on a song, speech, or podcast. Those are all tools we use to communicate in certain ways. That's a very difficult distinction, so if you're confused about it, don't worry, feel free to reach out to me and ask me questions about it, but the way that it helps me remember things is to remember the word ways for mode, so how we communicate, and tools, the tools we use to have that communication happen. The physical things we have to use to communicate with one another. Next steps from this, when we're talking about multimodality, are two common phrases or two common exercises you'll hear when you think about multimodal projects, namely remix and remediation. Remix is probably the one you've heard about frequently, most often in terms of songs. Songs will often be remixed from one form to sort of the most common way of remixing songs is to create, quote, dance remixes of songs. So taking songs that might be slower paced and then upping the tempo a little bit to make them make more sense in a club environment. Basically how we do that is we take existing materials or pieces of art and we sample small bits of them and change them ever so slightly. Remember from our video for this week, Kirby Ferguson talks about the idea of copying something, transforming it into something new, and then combining it with other materials to make a brand new piece of art. So taking a sample of a song, say a beat, transforming it by upping or downing the tempo, and then combining it with new, transformed lyrics to create a new song. Remediation, which you may have heard about in connection with basic level education, is actually not that. This is a different definition of the word remediation, meaning to take a piece of media and changing how it's delivered. So changing specifically the mode and or medium of something is a remediation. You literally see the word media in there. So re-media. Change the media. Some examples I give are taking a book and turning it into a movie, taking a poem and turning it into a song, or taking a movie and turning it into a video game. Possibly one of the most famous remediations that you are probably aware of is the Harry Potter series. It started out as a famous children's book series and was turned into a multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar movie industry success. This is an example of a remediation, taking something that is almost entirely based in the linguistic textual mode and remediating it to something that relies heavily on both audio and visual means of communication in order to change how certain themes and ideas are communicated. Frequently when you hear about remediations, you sort of have that stereotypical debate of, is the book better than the movie? And those arguments often narrow down to, does the movie, or the new piece of media, accurately portray everything that, say, a 300-page book does? Can you get across the same amount of information in a 2.5-hour movie as you can in a book that might take you days to finish? Oftentimes the answer is no. So there is something that can either be changed or lost in a remediation. Or, possibly to think about it less negatively, you simply have to choose which aspects of the original text or object you find most important to then showcase in your remediation. Because you don't have time frequently to talk about everything when you go from one form to another. Remix, on the other hand, as I stated earlier, relies on pre-existing media and doesn't necessarily change how it is communicated, but it changes something minute about it to adapt it for a new form or a new environment. For example, a remix that you're probably familiar with is the Old Town Road remix that was sort of everywhere for the year of 2019, late 2018. If you at all listened to the radio or Spotify or went on TikTok or Twitter or Facebook, you were probably sick of this song by about March of 2019. The reason I'm bringing it up here is because it is a famous example of a remix that had a reason behind being remixed. It wasn't just something to make it make more money. There was sort of a push for this song, the original Old Town Road, to exist on the country music charts. And I wanted to, as you can see from the title of this next slide, go on a brief tangent about Old Town Road, and talk about the effectiveness of remix and what remixes are actually capable of doing. For a long time, Old Town Road was really high up on the country music charts, and the CMA, or the Country Music Association, removed the original song from the charts because they claimed it was more hip-hop than country. People were pretty upset about this because the argument at the time was the Country Music Association was concerned that a popular rap song written by a black person was slowly climbing up their charts, whereas country music stars like Billy Ray Cyrus saw the song as inherently country. So in order to make this song that some were arguing didn't fit on the country music charts more country, Billy Ray Cyrus, who, regardless of how you know him, is a legend in the country music industry, used his power and his weight as a country music star to hop onto a remix of Old Town Road and legitimize it in the country western world. So remix is this interesting subgenre where you're able to take things that already exist and tweak them in ways that can, and often do, fight back against, how do I say this, already established power structures that exist in the world. Whether that is telling the Country Music Association, a rap song written by a black artist can be on the country music charts, or whether it is protesting against copyright laws and legislation in the country, which we will talk about a little bit more next week. And finally, your work this week has an example of a remediation. It is a comic by artist Shen Comics titled Fly to the Heavens. On your Canvas pages, there is the link to the comic on, I believe it's called Webtoons, and a link to a fan-made voice actor dubbed video of the Fly to the Heavens comic. When you look through these texts, I want you simply to ask yourself the following questions. I'm clearly not collecting these. You don't have to email me the answers to these questions, but I want you to think about them as you look back and forth between a shorter example of a remediation. How does the comic portray sound, movement, and change in location? Comics are static text with images with them. It is impossible to portray sound orally, so comics often do textual tricks to portray things that rely on sight or hearing. Look out for those. Subsequently, how does the video then accomplish these same goals? If audio and visuals are things that a video can accomplish, how do they accomplish them differently? And then the final question, is the video better than the comic? Is the comic better than the video? Or is it just different? What's changed or lost when you go back and forth between the two versions? Think about these things. These are really interesting examples of remix and remediation, I find. Think about some that you're aware of. What are some books that you've seen that have been turned into movies? What are some terrible movie video games you've played in the past? What is a podcast that all of a sudden got a special on Netflix and they recorded it? Try to think of some things that you've seen in your daily life that connects to this concept of multimodality, remix, and remediation, and be thinking a little bit about your favorite way of communicating multimodally. As this week, around Wednesday, I'll be uploading another video introducing Project 4, your digital definition multimodal essay. See you then.